seen with the CARES Act. For some transit systems, that has truly been a lifeline, enabled them to keep doing some things. Other systems found that as an opportunity, and were able to pick up some additional funding and make some changes, do some things differently. But again, being flexible and ready to address some of these challenges, and in some cases maybe seeing things as opportunities is where we need to be, and address those. So Jill, if we could advance to the next slide. And I think this is just a reminder for the survey at this point. And so if you haven't, please fill it in, because in a moment we are going to look at some of the results. So we can go on, yes, to the next, checking in. Looking now at loss of ridership. So the graph I have here is actually from Utah Transit Authority. That's the large urban system in the Salt Lake City area. But I thought it was a great graph. It shows what has happened to their ridership. You can see, hopefully, that the top line, the blue line, but it actually has two other gray lines basically in alignment with it. So that is ridership for 2017, 18, and 19. The red line is their average weekday boardings in 2020, and as I'm sure you're all aware, the bottom fell out back in March. Their ridership is currently down 60% from what their normal ridership was, and so they have they continue to operate. They're operating many of the services. The light rail system, they've actually put extra cars on the train. So in some cases, trains that are 2 cars long have been running now 3 cars, just to get people spread out more. But the demand still is very low. The interesting thing I find with this is that recent traffic counts around the greater Salt Lake area show that traffic is back up to about 90% of what it was pre-COVID. And the question there is, what is generating all this traffic? People are not riding transit. That has not come back up, as you can see on the slide. Pretty much just a very slight increase from the low point in April. A lot of people are still working from home. My estimate is that there are some that are returning to work who were choice riders for transit, and they are not getting on transit. They're staying in their car, traveling by themselves. I also have a theory that there may be some people working from home who are just getting out and driving around to avoid their next Zoom meeting and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be available. So with that, we did ask the poll question on your loss of ridership. Jill, if you can bring up, I guess, the responses on the ridership question. All right, so we've got, the first one is, have you lost passengers? And it looks like we have, what, about 20 people responded, 85% saying yes. Interesting, the 15% indicating no. We'll talk a little bit about that, because again, some thoughts there in terms of who's still riding, and it may relate to some of the systems that are represented here. But the next question, just by how much? So looks like 35% said less than 25%. Another 12%, 2 responses in the 12 to 50. In the 50 to 65, we had 29 responses, more than 65%. 4 responses, so 24%. So definitely systems here having lost ridership. And that is a challenge. If you're working to keep your system going, depending upon how you are funded, if you are reimbursed for some of those rides, you don't have that revenue, but yet you need to keep operating. So we can go back to the slides, Jill, and on to the next one. All right. So some of the other impacts we did talk, yeah, loss of funding, and so we're going to hop back and forth here. The next question we had out there was, have you lost funding this year as a result of the impacts of COVID? So we can switch over to the responses on the question related to loss of funding. All right, there we are. So in this one, looks like about 20% said yes, loss in funding, 80% no. So actually at this point, I'd say that's pretty good. A number of the systems I've talked with have seen a drop in their funding, but some of those, it's because they are funded directly out of sales tax revenues. And some places have dedicated sales taxes strictly to fund transit. And so they are facing that loss of revenue and trying to continue operating. The next question, and we'll just stay right here on the slides here, is have you limited capacity on your vehicles? And it looks like almost everyone said yes, they had limited capacities, and that has been one of the responses we've seen a lot of places is transit systems limiting how many passengers can be on board the bus at once. So Joe, we can go back to the slides. And I was going to just give you an example, and I think this is maybe one of the challenges, and certainly would be interested to hear from you in terms of what you may have done with capacity limitations. In Utah, the State Division of Services for People with Disabilities has put a limit on the transportation providers that are funded through their program of one person on a vehicle at a time. So all the rides are being given to one individual at a time. The challenge there is that their reimbursement rate is at about $8.40 per one-way trip. And so if you limit your trips to one person at a time, that means you basically are operating at less than one passenger per revenue hour for your productivity, because you're going to have time between passenger drop-offs and the next passenger pickup. And at a reimbursement rate of $8.40, you probably are not going to be able to even come close to breaking even. So even if you have not lost revenue, the impact of reducing the number of people you can take at a time, the limitation in capacity can impact your budget significantly, because you are maintaining your operating cost, but your reimbursement or revenue for specialized transportation may be dropped considerably, because where before you may have been able to put several people on the vehicle at a time, or even group trips, the challenge is that now with that limitation, you basically are forced into a losing proposition. And the question is, how long can you sustain an operation when your revenue is significantly lower than what your operating costs are? Another area that we've heard is starting to have an impact, and I think comes back to this in terms of productivity, whether you limit your productivity in terms of capacity, or with the Olmstead decision and many community-based services, the reduction in numbers of people living in a group residence situation. The productivity impacts are, again, drive that down, increasing your cost per passenger trip, because you can't carry as many people at a time. And so the question we had for you, this was not in the poll, but we'd be interested to hear if and how any of you are seeing impacts from that Olmstead decision, and residences being more dispersed in the community, people living at home, more community-based type services. So I'm going to pause, and if anyone has a comment, and I don't know, Mariah, is the easiest thing to just have them chat them in. I'm not quite sure how we're set up on the other end there, whether it's chat in or if there's a microphone available in the actual conference room, I think either way would be fine for us.
Yeah, if people want to go ahead and send it via the chat, and then if you want to ask your question maybe in person, just send your name on the chat, and then I'll let you know when to unmute yourself so we don't have a chaos.
All right, that sounds good. Yeah, so if you've seen impacts from that, if you'd be willing to share with everyone, we'd certainly be interested in seeing that, because I think we're starting to see those, and probably they will be compounded as we move forward and people start being less fearful about getting out and start using transportation services again. All right. Are we getting anything? Not seeing anything there. We could move on, but if you do have something you're willing to share, I'd say type it in. We'll be able to come back to it as well during the Q&A session.
That's
So,
yep, nothing yet.
okay. All right, Jill, if we can go to the next slide. So I want to talk just about rural transit needs, because I think some of the places where we're seeing that real loss in ridership are areas where people have options. You get more choice riders on transit, so urban areas. And so you saw the graph from Salt Lake City area, and a lot of people are able to work from home. I know some of the areas where we've got some of the tech companies, they can work from home just as well as being in the office, and so that's what's happening. Rural areas, we have a much higher percentage of people who are absolutely dependent on the local transit service. And when we go out and survey users or talk to people about what their needs are in smaller communities, rural areas, right at the top is access to their medical appointments, followed by shopping, particularly for groceries and medications. These are not people going out to just shop for the enjoyment of wandering around the mall. These are people that just need to get to the store to get groceries and medication to maintain their independence in living. And then employment trips. But these are people who are really dependent on transit. These needs are not going away. And so I think the big challenge as we look at this in terms of communications that we'll be discussing is how do we know what those needs are? How do we find out what people's fears are in particular now? We just did a survey and a question and asked people why they were reluctant to use transit. Fear came out as a very high one, and we didn't have that broken down, but clearly with the current situation and issues of COVID and possibility of infection, that has to be right at the top of people's fears for getting out and riding transit. So if we do address that and have ways to minimize the risk, how do we communicate that? And so with that, I'm going to hand things off and be available for discussion later on.
Well, thank you, AT. This is Jill Brown. I'm going to take over the reins for a little bit. Today, I'm going to be talking about the PESO model, P-E-S-O. It includes 4 types of communications: paid, earned, shared, owned. When you integrate all 4, you raise visibility and credibility for yourself and your services. Today, we're going to focus on just a few specific tools. I selected them partly because of what I'm seeing in the marketplace. And also, there have been a few themes I've seen while working with 7 Southwestern transit providers as part of the contract I have with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. So let's start by checking in on that survey. I hope you guys are taking a moment to go to polco.us/MPTA and answer just a few questions. Let's see what you think about seniors and internet service. I'm gonna switch screens. and refresh to see if we've had some more answers come in. So what percentage of your seniors? Oh, we did get a few more in. So 39% think that less than 30% of your seniors have access to the internet. Almost half think it's about half. And then 13%, or 3 of you, said 80% or more of your seniors have access to the internet. Well, I've got an interesting stat to share with you that comes from the National Aging and Disabilities Transportation Center. They say of seniors, 86% have internet access, and even almost 70% have a smartphone. And then on the right, the use of social media, over half of older adults are using social media as well. So I wanted to draw your attention because I've been hearing in working around the state that we think seniors aren't as connected as perhaps they really are. And that becomes important when we try to reach them with communications. So let's start in our 4-component model with paid. Think of paid as anything that costs you money. You know, beyond the traditional ads, there's email marketing, and then there's digital ads. These digital ads are pretty new. And one of the cool things about digital ads is the ability to target your audience. The example you see on the screen is a transportation project that's happening in the city of Ramsey. So geo-targeting allows the client to send ads to people in the city of Ramsey, that blue area. So when residents go online to play their favorite game, or maybe to surf for a favorite recipe, we can reach them with an ad. Now, beyond that, the client wants to reach people traveling through Ramsey to let them know about construction plans at a major intersection. Geofencing enables us to draw a circle around an intersection. Cell phones that travel through it can be captured. Later, when those drivers arrive home, maybe in Elk River or St. Cloud or wherever, an ad will be waiting for them when they check in on the stock market or maybe another news site. Here's a true transit digital ad running in their service area. What I like about digital ads is they're so flexible. You can change the messages to focus on seniors, students, holiday shoppers. It's a very flexible tool. So flexible, you can pick a market. Like for one campaign I did to reach people of color to raise awareness of a state program, worked with a company that reviewed all the data that's out there on all of us and provided an audience of just people of color that were located throughout the state. So that's laser focusing of who I want the message to go to and why. So there are transit providers I'm working with who advertise on network TV, and that's great. I'm all for that. Now there's a trend of more of us cutting the cords to our television sets. We're using Netflix and Roku and Apple TV, and the ads are following us. This graphic you're looking at here gives a glimpse of the content you're able to access without an antenna or a dish or a cable provider. And this chart shows you how this advertising on the Rokus and the Apple TV type programs is just going to go through the roof. That first bullet saying that the time we spend with what they're calling connected TV is up 81% year over year. Probably not surprising with all the time we're spending at home, COVID. Another technology tool that I want to share that's on the cutting edge is something called Revelio, and it's in the category of augmented reality. Now, COVID has impacted the speed of technology. In my marketing class at St. Thomas, I've learned retailers are 2 to 3 years ahead of schedule on virtual and augmented reality tools. The one I'm using right now is called Revelio. It uses your cell phone and a free app, and with your phone, you can make inanimate objects come to life. I'm going to show you a short video of a business card. And when you use your phone, you point it at this business card, the image is going to be activated into a video. but you'll watch the video right on the business card. You don't get sent to a website. You don't get, it's not like a QR code. It happens right on that business card. So there was your quick little taste. So imagine anything you print. It can be a postcard. It can be a greeting card. It can be an ad on a bus bench. You can turn it into an active engagement. And there are also buttons that appear on your phone screen, and you can send an email or a text message. You can go to a website. You can download a coupon to ride at a discount. It's a pretty impressive tool, and it's just a glimpse of, I think, what marketing is coming to next with augmented reality. Now we're going to switch to earned in the PESO model. It's earned as in getting your name in print or in front of people. I've learned while working with the 7 Southwestern transit providers that you are some of the busiest professionals in the state. And I know you have a lot on your plate. So today I have 2 things I want to mention. I want to give you a hack for getting more out of your media relations. And then I have a recommendation to get better media coverage. So first, the hack. Many of you present to elected boards at meetings where reporters are in attendance. So my hack is give the reporter a copy of your remarks. If you make his or her job easier, it increases the odds that you're going to get some good coverage of your service. And if you hand them a copy of your presentation, chances are better that the numbers they report on will be accurate. And now the recommendation that I have for you. Don't waste a piece of news. If you get a new bus, like Take Me There Transportation Services did this year, or if you have a change in service, perhaps a milestone with employees, like a Years of Service Award, anniversary of your organization or service, mark those occasions and get some more mileage out of them. Call the local media, draft a news release that gives the who, what, where, when, why, and how. You don't know how to do a news release, you can ask for help. Watonwan County's Take Me There Transportation worked with minimal guidance from me and Sue Rowe with the Minnesota Department of Transportation to do a ribbon cutting just a couple of weeks ago for a bus that they put into service during COVID. The media reported the new bus allows for an extra wheelchair. It was paid for mostly with money from MnDOT. It is their first bus to have a security camera system, TV monitor, and electronic door. In the photo are county and city policymakers and a rider who offered kind words about her quality of life thanks to Take Me There. The business community was represented too, with a quote from the city's Economic Development Authority director that said, "It's nice to have affordable, dependable transportation for people of all ages." And that's gold. That's a gold ticket to have people in the community saying things like that about your service. And what it takes is providing the opportunity with this simple ribbon cutting service that Allison got a lot of mileage out of. So I think you all have a great story to tell. For example, you take the recent study that MnDOT conducted to measure the economic benefits of rural and small urban transit services in greater Minnesota. For every dollar invested, $2.51 is shared back into the communities on average, and you are a valuable asset. You've got a lot to celebrate. We're going to switch back to Polko for a second and see how many of you are using a tracking system for your referral network. Refresh it, see if anyone else has responded. You can still jump in here and answer. We've got Jill Cahoon coming up too. It's got some questions in here. Oh, I guess we're going to do social media first. Get both for now. So everybody's got some social media presence. That's good. Account that you have control over. That's good. And I see that there are 5 of you who provide content to a parent organization. That was something that I found interesting when I started working with transit systems to see what you have available to you. And a question about using paid advertising online. Oh yeah, it's good. Several of you have been doing that. And we're going to come back in a minute to that last one. I do appreciate you answering these survey questions. It helps us understand where you're at in your ongoing journey to communicate with your different audiences. So networking, referral, it's about building up people to help you. It's another way to get some earned coverage to what you do. So networking is the science of speeding up trust. It's getting other people to refer you for transportation services. In order for them to do that, you need to provide a value. Value is important when you're networking. I would encourage you to think in terms of offering your services as a value. And then I believe it's very important to track this activity, to know who you're reaching out to, how you're getting a hold of them, where are you interacting with them, do you make promises to send them a brochure or a coupon, document it, follow it up. Thank you notes are critically important. They are more likely to refer you again if they know the referral they made was appreciated, and even more so if they know what happened to that referral. If you are able to get back to them and let them know that you provided that ride, or that you met that new person that they introduced you to and perhaps another human services agency. Those are critical ways to build some muscle in networking. And that increases the army of people that are spreading the good news about what you do. So we checked that survey already on social media presence. We could spend hours talking about social media. I just want to mention a couple of things. Remember, social media is about being human. So you don't want to sell all the time. You do want to do some conversation building as well. There are advertising opportunities in social media. I think there are great editorial or tutorials on Facebook for how to boost posts and how to buy ads on Facebook, for example. I'm listing Pixels. That's a little lesser known tool. Pixels require you put a piece of code on your website, on your transit website. When someone visits your website to check you out, that pixel makes note and follows them if they go to, let's say, Facebook. When they get to Facebook and they're just scrolling through their feed, they're going to get an ad about your transit service that you have paid for and have got it in the queue, just waiting for them. So what it gets to is a qualified lead. Because they visited your website, they're a much more valuable lead than anyone who is just happening to be on Facebook. And I think more and more, we want to get to the qualified leads. Who can we educate? Who can we invite on the bus? So let's take another quick look. Polco, has anyone come and played on Polco? Answered any more questions? Let's do a quick refresh. Let's see what we've got. Good. Oh, thank you, people, for getting involved. Lots of public meetings as your preferred tool for soliciting input and feedback from community members. Not surprised. Paper surveys, yeah. Online surveys, good. Direct mail, just a little bit. Oh, phones, you're only one using phone surveys. That's interesting. Paid advertising, social media content, great. I can tell you are, from experience, knowing you got to try many different things. Have to offer many times. I was just on a sales training where the instructor said, you have to expect to offer something you're trying to sell like 9 to 11 times before someone's going to pay attention. I think that's gone up as demand for our attention has gone up. So we're going to talk just a little bit more in depth about Polco, this we're using to engage with you right now on the survey. It's a way to get more information from your communities so you can inform your board or your technical committee decisions. And it's also a way to fine tune your messaging and make sure you're getting to parts of your community that maybe you haven't heard from in the past. So I just want to mention that some governmental units are using CARES Act dollars to upgrade from the free Polko accounts that anybody can get to a little more robust program that enables you to engage, and listen, and build trust and work together with your community. Here's an example of what you can do with Polko. So you're experiencing the simple end where we've just posted a survey about our seminar today, and you can answer quick questions. If you delve deeper in, you can set up accounts where you ask questions of people in your community, and you can find out who's answering and how strongly they feel about their answers. What you're looking at is a graphic from a survey that was conducted in Rochester, Minnesota. One of the questions pertained to the height of a building in a bus rapid transit route. And the question was asked about how do you feel about building heights? Well, this map gives us more than just a yes or no answer. We know more than whether the percentage are okay with taller buildings by the route or not. What we know by looking at this map is which neighborhoods feel strongly. The green are people that responded yes to the question, but the shades of green tell us how strongly that area feels. And the gray sections that said no, and by sections I mean precincts. We can drill down to the precinct level and even a little further to know if the person who answered is a registered voter or not. So when you go to your boards, you are able to provide tremendous detail. And you're able to look at the results and say, okay, this precinct over here is a strong no. I think we want to go talk to people. I think we want to go find out more about what's happening in that part of town that's different from other parts of town. We're going to switch in the model to owned. A couple quick things about owned. When I started working on the pilot marketing plans with the Southwest transit providers, I learned that it wasn't always clear which money or when you could spend dollars on advertising specialties. So for the purposes of our pilot program, we have this answer from MnDOT, and that is, with these state dollars, in this plan at least, we can spend up to $5 per item to promote transit services through giveaways like hand sanitizer or grocery bags or calendars, magnets. Now, if you are going to use federal dollars, it's a different ballgame. I understand that federal dollars are not allowed on something like this, but I think it's empowering to know MnDOT recognizes the value of getting your name and contact information out there in a variety of ways, and I commend them on that. Another owned is advertising on your bus and in your bus. What do you think about this image? It shows a bus covered in laundry, and the ad is for all laundry detergent, and the text, which you can't really read here, says something to the effect of, we washed all these clothes with one bottle. I can't imagine that flying in Minnesota, but I thought it was very creative. In working with the transit providers, I'm learning about opportunities to advertise transit inside your bus. Your riders may be able to access regional services. Let's advertise those regional services inside your own buses. And then there's advertising space outside the buses too. So I would encourage you to look at using that space at a minimum to educate your own riders and to recruit new riders. And then to consider, and I know it varies from place to place, the ability to sell advertising on your bus as a revenue source. There's also in kind, where you trade for promoting the TV station, you get some airtime. So there's a number of creative ways you could move that forward. I want to say a couple quick things about evaluation in the PESO model. It wasn't long ago we were focused on impressions. You know, how many friends do you have on a Facebook account? How many people in a newspaper circulation that will potentially see the ad? And those are still valid metrics. I'm seeing more movement towards leads and qualified leads. So Google Analytics is a great tool for evaluating how people are finding your website, how long they stay, which pages they're attracted to. It's a good tool for measuring who's taking action. Beyond just who might have seen your image, who is taking action. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I wanted to mention like that statewide digital advertising campaign to people of color. We, in 2 months, delivered over 1.5 million impressions to people of color. And that's impressive, I think. 1.5 million is wow. But it's the clicks that provide the leads. And the campaign had about 1,800 clicks in 2 months. And the percentage can seem really low, but in digital advertising, that's really good. I mean, this was a good, excellent return on the investment of getting all those impressions. So getting educated about what is the normal range in some of these newer technologies is an important step. So to recap, what we've got here for the PESO model, you can strategically build your reputation through a mix of paid, earned, shared, and owned outlets. The newer digital options we talked about today, combined with media relations and networking, can help you communicate with current and potential riders. Your visibility will be heightened in the community and online in the digital world. I want to thank the Minnesota Public Transit Association for inviting me to participate today, and my panelists have been a delight to work with, and I'm going to hand it over to the next Jill.
Thanks, Jill. And actually, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to pop over to Polko for a second. And the first question that we asked in my section had to do with whether or not you currently utilize a stakeholder network or stakeholder coalition or a technical advisory committee, a TAC, as a lot of you call them. And it looks like about 3/4 do utilize a technical advisory or stakeholder committee, and 1/4 do not. Thank you. So Jill, we can actually then jump into the PowerPoint presentation as well. So I know that I've spoken with several of the Minnesota providers before about technical advisory committees. We presented to them as part of the 5-year transit system plans. We talked about the benefits of interacting regularly with the technical advisory committees. But beyond that, a stakeholder coalition or network is really a great asset for a transit agency. As I mentioned, and as you responded, a lot already use the TAC. It doesn't have to be necessarily as formal as a technical advisory committee, and we'll get back into that a bit more in a few minutes on the next slide. But the technical advisory committees and stakeholder groups are generally used to collect information about community needs and respond to challenges that come up, smaller challenges that come up. But these groups can actually be used for so much more. And we've been doing some research and working with groups across the country who have really large and extensive stakeholder networks or coalitions, which again can be formal or informal. We'll get more into that in a second. An active stakeholder coalition group network can supply a transit agency with a lot of useful information. It's not necessarily always only needs and then quick fixes. It can also be a heads up about a new trip generator or a new program for seniors, for example. Given pandemic conditions, for example, stakeholders can provide transit agencies with information about revised shift times so that transit agencies can plan better, remote versus in-person work and school activities and schedules, when social programs will reopen. And having that dialogue allows the transit agency to also be able to make more informed decisions, so the information can flow in that direction. Stakeholder coalitions and networks can also get the word out about how to use the service when there are changes to service. when you have a stakeholder delivering information to the community or to a member of the public, and there's someone that they engage with regularly, or they regularly receive information from that group, they might be more likely to listen the first time. As Jill mentioned, you know, putting the word out there 9 to 11 times, I think she said, before the message gets through. You can actually skip a couple of those steps if you have, you know, you have a trusted resource that's sharing information, so you can really utilize those your stakeholder group to do that. Communicating how the service is safe, what's being done to ensure cleanliness and safety. Those are things that are really important right now in order to rebuild ridership. And a well-educated stakeholder group is a low-cost way to educate the community about the service. And the stakeholder group removes some of the burden on community education from the transit agency, just by virtue of sharing your information more widely than you would be able to do with you and your own staffs. So next slide, please, Jill. So as I mentioned, a stakeholder group can take many formats, either formal or informal. A tax generally selected or mandated by the board, but a coalition could be a freestanding group of transit advocates that occasionally meets with the transit agency and also receives updates about transit service. And that doesn't have to always be through meetings, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. And a network could be an informal group of stakeholders that regularly receives updates from the transit agency, but infrequently meets. They just regularly have that information available from the transit agency to get the word out to their various constituencies. So regardless of format, the stakeholder group should represent diverse community interests: healthcare, shopping, employers, workforce, senior centers, educational institutions, social and human service agencies, downtown advocacy groups, chambers of commerce, even internal staff members that perhaps don't frequently get to participate in some of these discussions that are either one-on-one or with stakeholder groups, or collecting information from riders. You can actually really gain a lot of traction with your staff members by having them participate, and also learn things you maybe wouldn't have known otherwise. So there's definitely a component of possibly mixing internal and external relationships through the use of a stakeholder group. So having a diverse group increases the chance of receiving advance notice about changes, because they're coming at us from all different angles, especially now given pandemic conditions, and then also increases the reach of community education. Traditionally, stakeholder groups have met in person, but they can also meet virtually, or just receive updates, and we'll talk a bit more about perhaps ways that information can be shared beyond just meetings. At least quarterly interaction is recommended, if not more frequent, especially in pandemic situations. Probably monthly. Things are changing so rapidly right now that if you wait too long, you will have missed the opportunity to learn about that change, the shift change, or the senior social group opening back up on Wednesday mornings, or whatever it might be. Meeting as regularly as is feasible, given your, as Jill mentioned, very complicated time schedules, could really is a benefit to your operations, as well as solidifying your role in the community and communicating your value, as Jill mentioned as well. So transit agencies can communicate directly with stakeholders beyond meetings, with things like emailed or mailed newsletters, brief email updates, social media posts, as Jill mentioned in her section, website, a blog. Could have an administrator's blog on your website to just regularly, at some interval, talk about what's been going on with the organization. Doesn't have to be huge, doesn't have to maybe seem exciting to you, but it might seem, exciting to others. And what really the point is that the community knows that you're that you're engaged and really part of the larger community in providing that valuable service. Could I then, Jill, switch over and see the poll for whether or not you have increased or decreased your engagement since, believe we said March of 2020 when the pandemic really got going. Okay, so we've got about the same for increased and decreased, but the majority of you said that you have about the same. So there hasn't been a real change in the amount of engagement since March 2020. Okay, good to know. All right, Jill, we can jump back in and go to, yep, exactly. Go to the next slide. You're right there. Perfect. So as with stakeholder group interaction, communication with the larger community, it goes both ways. It's bidirectional. Community engagement is often seen as an opportunity to collect information from the community, but it also can be used as a way to educate the community on ease of use, benefit to the community, new services, et cetera. And as Jill mentioned, finding opportunities to communicate success is key. Again, it doesn't have to be something that you want to put on a billboard. It could be something like receiving a new bus, instituting a new program, having a new community partner, how you're cleaning the buses to make them safe for people to use. The interaction and really customer-focused service that you're providing and having a few pictures. You know, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't need to be billboard worthy, but it really does make a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense for showing the value in the community. So it can also, the solutions, the point is that the solutions show the agency as an active community partner. So the key, as Jill mentioned also, to engaging the community is diversity, both in terms of collecting information and also sending out information. So rely on the stakeholders to help. You can create a communication piece, one piece, a flyer, a newsletter, a blurb about something cool that you've done, or a blog post, and share that information, that one piece, via a bunch of different channels. You can share via email distribution lists, post it on the website, social media, print it out and post it on buses, share it as a press release, send copies to stakeholders to share at their community events, either in person or online, or attend those community events in person or online, and share copies of that flyer, whatever that piece is. Just continually work to get the word out there. Again, diversity of all kinds of different channels is the way to get the information out there. Like the key to financial freedom being being diversification, same goes for community and stakeholder involvement. Jill, would you mind jumping over to the poll again? One way that we can get the word out regularly is through the use of newsletters. So this is perfect. So the question was, do you currently or in the past put together a newsletter? So about a third of agencies are releasing newsletters regularly still. Others have done it in the past but aren't currently doing it, and it's almost an even split, and 30% are not using newsletters. All right, Jill, back again. You're getting your click health in there. Finger health, finger exercise going. So the we want to show some examples of newsletters and ways that that you can communicate easily with your stakeholders, with your internal staff members, with the community at large. Next slide, please, Jill. So newsletters can have sophisticated design. This example is from the Comet in South Carolina. There are some free or inexpensive options to help with design for designing newsletters, social media ads, and things like that. We do have a handout as part of this session, if you're in person, I believe that they are paper copies, and they are on the MPTC website in a virtual form, probably as a PDF. So we can talk a bit more about that later on, but those are available. So we did include some links to these resources for you for helping out with design and also providing examples. So all of these newsletter examples I'm going to show over the next few slides here, links to them are also available on this session's handout. So what I like about this newsletter example is that it provides educational information about the programs available and how to use those services. It even shows you some pictures. It reminds people about the benefits of transit service. Again, any opportunity that you can take to talk about the value of transit service in the community is really very important. And in the bottom right-hand side, you see that there is some information from APTA on the benefits of transit service. And Jill mentioned too, there's some local data available now from Minnesota. So you could utilize the information from those reports on your newsletters. That's something that you can include on every newsletter that goes out. So it reminds folks of the benefits of the transit service. And some of the information appears in every newsletter. Like, for example, the benefits of transit service. So not all the content has to be new or recreated every time a new newsletter is released. And it provides announcements of things of immediate concern as well, in addition to overarching educational types of content. Next slide, please. Newsletters can also be very useful with less sophisticated design. This is an example from Marysville, California. What I like about this example is that it shows both service announcements and information about public health and safety on transit. So this example is one of many. I believe they're quarterly with this organization. And all of the newsletter examples that are shown here, the list on the handout is a directory of newsletters. So you can see what each of the organizations is putting out now, especially having to do with COVID, and what they put out in non-COVID, quote unquote, more normal times for content. Next slide, please. So finally, newsletters can be very simple. This one is from Bellingham, Washington. It has a couple of announcements, a couple of pictures, describes the success. It's mailed out to paratransit riders, and it's simple, but it keeps transit and community at the forefront. And the paratransit riders who receive this newsletter see pictures of perhaps folks that they consider to be, friendly faces when they were using the service, pre-COVID, and it also helps them feel part of the community, and it encourages and it reminds the engagement of transit service within the community as well. Alrighty, next slide, please, Jill. So collecting feedback from the community can help the transit agency to make more informed decisions, as I mentioned a bit earlier, and identify where changes or improvements are needed. Online surveys are a simple way to collect feedback. SurveyMonkey's free. It offers a range of question types and automatically generates survey links and QR codes. It used to be that QR codes didn't get a whole lot of clicks, but now that even restaurants are using QR codes to find their menu, folks are getting pretty used to using QR codes with their smartphone cameras. So you could use one of the free design or transit resources that we mentioned on the handouts, or that maybe Jill mentioned earlier in this session. And these can use that to make flyers that can be posted on vehicles, emailed to stakeholders, posted on the website, shared on social media, sent out with a press release. And more sophisticated options are out there too. We're using Polko today, as we've talked about. There's also text campaigns that are possible through services like Textizen, like Citizen, except it's Textizen, where questions are asked and answers returned via text message, so no internet or smartphone is required, and information can be pushed out via text if you opt in to receive information. So there's a lower tech option out there as well. It's always important to have both higher tech and lower tech options. Google Voice is another one that's free, creates a local phone number that can be used to collect voicemails from community members. So you could ask a simple question and ask customers to call in and leave a voicemail with their answer. Again, no internet or smartphone required, it's free. And then website forms are a good way to collect feedback. You could ask a couple of questions on your existing website and provide a quick text box for folks to provide feedback. And then of course, polling functions are available on all the different virtual meeting platforms as well. Next slide, please. One other option is an effective but bit more expensive solution at the Every Door Direct Mailer program through the U.S. Post Office. The post office offers design partners for the cards themselves to be designed, and then, or you can design them yourself, again, perhaps using one of those free examples that we talked about before. And then you can decide if you want the cards to be mailed out to all addresses in a zip code, just businesses, just residential addresses, to several zip codes, to one zip code, to a whole region. The choice is yours. It's just a question of budget, depending on how far you want your geographic reach to be. And you can get the word out. It's more expensive, so you might want to, save that type of advertising for a study to get the word out about a survey in a public meeting or a major service change. But every mailbox in the defined area will get a copy. This example that we're showing here, it's bigger than a postcard, so it comes in a size that gets folks' attention. Given the election coming up, you probably have seen quite a few political ads come through your mailbox that are like this, but you can do the same thing. You get really good coverage with the Every Door Direct mailers. So that's another opportunity that's out there for you. And with the post office giving you potential designers out there just right on their website as you sign up for Every Door Direct mailers, they make it even easier if you don't want to design your own. So one more jump over to the poll, Jill, if you wouldn't mind, and then we'll get into virtual engagement best practices. So the last question we asked was, do you feel that virtual engagement is as productive, less productive, or more productive? Let's see. So we have about half said as productive, about 40% said less productive, and then the other 10% said more productive. Okay, good to know. So we're generally feeling it's more productive or less productive, or as productive or less productive. All righty, back to this slideshow. Thank you. And actually, it's funny because AT shared with me some national results from business travelers. They all thought that virtual meetings were far less productive than actually getting out there. So it sounds to me like business travelers want to get back out there on the road. Regardless of productivity level, there are some lessons learned and some information that we could share. And as you chose in your responses to the polls, it's likely that everyone's getting some level of virtual meeting fatigue, since we're more than 6 months into pandemic conditions now. But we have learned a few things and looked into some research that hopefully you can use to make your virtual meetings more productive and reduce some virtual meeting fatigue. So first off, and most importantly, consider what you're trying to accomplish with a virtual meeting. If you're just sharing information and you don't need feedback or conversation, send an email or post on the website or social media or in the newsletter. Secondly, how will others benefit from the information you share or conversation or feedback that's generated? If, again, you're just sharing information, that can be written out and shared in a different way. It doesn't require a meeting. It's that feedback. So how will you share the information that you've learned, conversation and feedback that you've generated? Will it be recorded? Will there be a follow-up email summarizing what was learned? How can the information be shared? We have a bit of feedback. If everyone could mute themselves if they're not participating, thank you. Alrighty, and very soon we'll open up the lines for questions and feedback as we're talking about virtual meeting fatigue. So when communicating with stakeholders in the public, also make sure that low or no tech options are available, like local or toll-free call-in numbers for virtual meetings, paper versions of surveys and flyers. So, make sure that when you're deciding whether or not, how you want to engage with folks, deciding whether it's a meeting or some other format, consider what you're trying to accomplish. And then next slide, please, Jill. Virtual engagement does, in some cases, ensure some amount of easier access. Some things. So Google Translate and website translation tools are becoming more sophisticated. Many are free. And making documents accessible is becoming more user-friendly, as we discovered when we put together this PowerPoint presentation. It's pretty easy now. There are text boxes to enter the information to make documents accessible. And make sure that folks have a chance to provide feedback through voice or typed options. Again, the interaction, the feedback, and the information learned are what's most important when deciding what format or to use for your virtual engagement. And that is the end of my section, and I believe Mariah will hand it back over to you for questions and answers.
Perfect. Well, we've got a few questions that we've received so far. I'll go ahead and read those to everyone. And then as we're going through these Q&A, please also, if you have questions, send them to the chat box and we'll answer them in the order that they're received. The first question that we got was about whether the presentations will be available after today's training session. And I believe the answer to that is yes, and it's also being recorded. Can you guys confirm that that's the case? Yep, I think that is true. And then we also got a comment from Alan Herman. This was answering AT Stoddard's question about provider changes, I believe. And he said, we've had a large provider change the way we do business to, instead of bringing clients to one location, they're now changing to direct transport to jobs and using their own vehicles instead of public transit. And we also got a question from Alan Herman. He asked, how often do you recommend each community session, annual, biannual, or quarterly?
I guess I'll jump in with the community sessions answer, and then we can circle back as needed to the other comment on the change. So community sessions, it really depends on what you're trying to learn and how frequently or how regularly or how dramatically things are changing. So right now in an area of when we're in a time of constant change, probably monthly communications are good. As a general rule, quarterly communications with the community, even if they're brief, it's fine. And then for more detailed or more complex information, either twice a year or once a year, in what we would maybe call normal situations or normal conditions.
Perfect. We also got a comment from Nick Lemmer. He answered the question, Jill Cahoon, that you asked about the type of engagement activity and how people felt about virtual engagement. He said it depends on the type of engagement activity. So, and we also got a question from Ryan Danielowski from Sherburne County, the Sherburne County Commissioner. She asked, hi Jill, is there any conversation about the impact to the North Star in regards to the decrease in runs and impact to our veteran community and others that would also use this system to access their medical needs?
Well, hello, Ray. It's good to hear from you. I'm not in a position to answer that today. I'm not the North Star Corridor Development Authority, which was a client of mine for more than a decade, is no longer active. And so I'm not in constant contact with Metro Transit to know what's happening with North Star. I only know what I'm seeing in the newspaper. Like you are probably seeing the same information. I know it's down. I know it's down quite a bit, and the schedule's been impacted. I share your concern about the veterans.
Thank you. Yeah, Rayanne also shared that the ridership is down around 90%. I think you guys can see that as well. We haven't received any other questions yet, but we can sit tight here and let people send them in. If you'd rather speak your questions out, we might be able to figure the logistics of that out. But probably sending them in via chat is the best way to do that.
While we're waiting for a question to come in, oh, Rand is going to put in a question. Go ahead, Mariah.
Yep, Ryan just asked what kind of opportunities for other forms of transit opportunities could be used.
What other opportunities?
Do we need clarification on that?
Yes.
Ryan, if you could clarify what you mean with that question, that would be terrific. Thank you. Right, Rand said, what kind of opportunities for other forms of transit opportunities could be used to help with the North Star ridership?
One comment I can offer about that pertains to all of us in the transportation business is marketing transit in general. I believe that is helpful in making people aware. As I mentioned, the cross marketing you can do with regional services. In North Star's case, North Star Link, operated by St. Cloud Metro Transit, connects people to the train. And so they do a lot of marketing about using a bus to get to the train service. In southwestern Minnesota, we have overlap of services like Brown County and True Transit. So we're talking with Brown County about advertising inside of their buses that True Transit is available to take people to Mankato. Heartland Express in New Ulm can get you to the spot where True Transit will meet you and take you to Mankato. So cross-pollinating, I think, is one way we can strengthen transit messages in general.
Thank you. We just got a question from Alan Herman. He asked, how do you feel about group texting capabilities for communications?
I'm seeing it used quite a bit in the election. I don't know about anyone else. If you're getting message, I was a little taken aback the first time I got a text message saying, I see you haven't voted early yet. I was, oh, who knew that? So I felt a little intrusive, and yet I had to say, wow, that's impressive. That's using data in a whole new way to be so targeted. So I think it's got potential.
I agree, and we've used it in transit studies before. As I mentioned, Textizen, for example, we had a study that was actually really similar to the 5-year transit system plans for 7 counties outside of Rochester, New York, not Minnesota, and that was one of the ways that we needed a higher tech and a lower tech option. So the group text was a way to get the word out to ask survey questions, but it also was utilized to announce the locations and times of public meetings in in the different communities. And actually that area of the country has 2 area codes. So the area codes were used to identify the locations that would be of interest to folks for the different public meetings. So anyway, I mean, family group text, getting a little tired of that one, but group text for getting the word out about things, that's seems to be pretty successful.
Terrific, thank you. Our next question is from Nick Lemmer. He asked, what are some particular strategies you have found successful for reaching historically underrepresented populations?
AT, you want to take that one first? I think we probably all have some ideas there.
Sure, I will jump in on there. One of the things is, I think it goes back to what Jill was talking about, having a good stakeholder group formed. And so you bring people in with that stakeholder group who have contacts or in some way represent some of those population groups and can reach out to them, because it is a challenge. And we find that trying to reach out, and even more so now, you know, where I used to be able to go out to the senior center at lunchtime and sit there and chat with people and talk to them. At least the areas I've been in, they're not gathering at the senior center now. Everybody used to go for lunch and their social time are now signing up for Meals on Wheels and getting lunch delivered. So one of the things we did is send out questionnaires with the Meals on Wheels, so that not only did they get a meal, they got a series of questions that they could send back through Meals on Wheels or mail in or go online and complete. But I think a key one is making the contacts with people that are either part of or have good relationships with those underrepresented population groups. And it may be churches, faith-based organizations, other human service agencies, you know, nonprofits, medical services. It all depends on the community. Another area where we've been working, there's a group who work with refugees that have been relocated to the U.S. from other countries. And so we're working through them to go. It's a variety of languages. I'm not sure we'd be able to cover all the language groups that are represented, but working with them, they have the contacts with those refugee families. So I think that from what I've seen, that's probably the biggest one, is expand your stakeholder core group to include representation out of that, those various population groups.
I think further to that example that AT just provided, we actually just did something very similar, where there's a group of new Americans. It's in Maine, so they call themselves New Mainers. So new Mainers, they are primarily from Africa and speak Lingala. And Lingala is primarily a spoken language, not a written language. So when we tried to get our written survey translated into Lingala, it didn't go well. So they actually speak French and Portuguese as well. So we had the written versions available in French and Portuguese. But then we sat down with the advocacy group that's providing support and volunteer services for these individuals within a certain community in Maine, and they provided both translation services live as well as live during a public meeting. So this particular group meets with their volunteer advocacy group every Friday at 3. So we were able to, via Zoom, so we were able to jump in to one of their regularly scheduled meetings. There were 2 people on the line who spoke Lingala and were able to translate back and forth, and we had a really active and open dialogue. And then we had a public meeting, again, it was on television, on the public access cable. And we gave the advocacy group the PowerPoint presentation and a recording of the dry run of the presentation for them to review in advance. And then they texted their advocate questions, and he asked them, translated and asked us live during the public meeting that was shown on TV. So again, really important stakeholder group, as AT said.
And I'll add just a couple more thoughts, because Jill and AT covered it so well, to build on what they're telling you. AT talked about finding gateway people to access audiences. think outside the box, literally the box, like a pizza box. Find the restaurants that are delivering food, and you put your flyer on top of that pizza box to get into neighborhoods where you're trying to engage. I've got a project with the Department of Human Services. We're using a tool called 100 Cups of Coffee, and that is being very mindful to reach out and engage audiences that might be missing from the conversation in the community and spend one-on-one time with them. Right now it's happening via Zoom, but there is, if you Google 100 cups of coffee, there's a whole template for being mindful and collecting information. And then the third thing I want to mention that I'm hearing in my human services world, and I just heard this a couple of weeks ago, a person who has she's a minority, she has a minority-owned business, and she said, what I've heard elsewhere, people need to stop asking us to give our time for free. People need to stop asking us to show up, to donate, to share, kind of spill our experience. We are looking for some compensation, just like the people who are coming to engage us are being paid to engage us. We would like a stipend. We would like to be fed. So I mentioned that to be sensitive to it.
Great. We got a comment. I think this was Jill Brown when you were talking about the different connecting agencies from one to the other. Alan Herman said Transit Link in Anoka County has hours available for transport, covers some of that area. So that's that comment. And then we just got a question from Nick Lemmer. He asked, regarding the PESO model, the share aspect often hard to leverage fully, that is getting others to share your content. Sharing taps the exponential power of social media. What are some strategies to make posts more likely to be shared?
Oh, good. He is thinking ahead. What I didn't go into earlier, but we'll take the opportunity to now, is the value of shared content in boosting your ratings in Google searches. So sharing content with the intent of, let's say you share it with a blogger. You want them to put a link on their blog back to where you own that material on your website. And you also want them to have key anchor words in that article that appears on their blog, because those key anchor words is what Google is looking for as they try to decide who's the expert out here on transit. So you want links that come back to your website, and you want anchor words that talk about transportation for older adults or transportation for people with disabilities. Those are things that Google's looking for. And as Google finds you attached to those things, you will rise up in the search. So you get closer and closer to those coveted spots on the first page of any search. So when you are approaching bloggers, or you're approaching magazines, or LinkedIn, even, think of all the different places you can share your content. You have to offer something of value. You got to be authentic to your own voice. It's got to be something that's shareable, and it's got to have the link back to your website. And I don't mean your homepage. It's got to be in your website where you have the content housed and those key anchor words. So you build your reputation. And I bet Jill or AT could add some more tips.
Go ahead, Jill. I'll defer to you on that. I'll say the one where we had probably the most benefit was actually doing some things to where we had paid boosting of the posts in Facebook. That got it out farther, and then people picked it up, and the sharing of those posts moved forward from there. So I think that was probably the one I saw was the biggest thing to get it started, was actually doing that and buying the boost to get it out in the first place.
And then brand recognition. So getting your name out there as much as possible. So sticking with the, with your brand, with your one voice. So always refer to yourself in the same way. So if there's a space between your words, always have a space between your words. If there's not, never have a space between your words, that sort of thing. So as much as possible, refer to yourself by your brand name. And then I'll also mention too, as AT said, if you're just getting started with social media, and we're working with several regional transit authorities in Massachusetts right now who are just getting started with social media. They're really just starting to build their presence. Geographically constraining Facebook or Twitter or Instagram advertising is an inexpensive way to get the word out there and start to, dip your feet into the world of social media advertising. It's like $11 a day, something like that. That's where it starts. You can decide how many days and for how long and for what geographic constraint you want to include. So that's a really great way to start, building your recognition in the internet world with all the back end connections that are made to get your name selected or build your reputation, as Jill was describing in Google's terms.
And Nick, check out a website. It's got a strange name, but it's really a good website. Spinsucks.com. Spinsucks.com is written by a public relations professional, and it's all about the science of building your value so that others will share your content, link back to you. It's got a lot of really good tips.
Thank you so much, everyone. Nick also added, he said, yes, the paid boost nudge, always a good plan. We don't have any other questions yet. I think we can keep it open a little bit and see if anyone else has any additional questions.
I was wondering if anyone is using CARES Act dollars to engage the public.
Great question. If you've got an answer to Jill's question, go ahead and send it into the chat box. We'll read it out. All right, we got a comment again from Nick Lemmer. He said the city of Rochester is using CARES funding for a web refresh.
Good. Good. Glad to hear it. I've also heard from some of the systems I'm working with that it's a tricky balance to be communicating with people and to have their capacity restricted on board right now. There's a nervousness about communicating too much and having to turn people away for rides. And I don't know if people want to talk about that or share how they're finding that balance.
Yeah, Jill, we've seen the exact same thing, talking about smaller systems being afraid to advertise their service because they, with capacity limitations, are already running at full capacity and are afraid they'd quickly be overrun.
A comment from Alan Herman. He said, yes, and also using it to advertise for new volunteers to deliver goods instead of passengers.
Yeah, I've seen some great stories during COVID of transit services delivering Meals on Wheels, other packages. Part of the community fabric. It's wonderful.
And a great thing to put in your newsletter or on your website or social media.
Yeah, there's a page on the RTAP website that has pictures that Greater Minnesota Transit Agency sent us of all the things they were doing around COVID, like food delivery and hand sanitizer and bus pictures.
You know, one of my systems is doing a unique thing. they just ordered masks, you know, the facial masks with their logo on it. And they are going to be mailing those to riders who were regular until March and they haven't seen them come back, which points to the value of data. You know, if you are collecting information on who's riding with you and you are able to get snail mail addresses, that's a different form than the email address, to reach out to them. And I think it's pretty creative that the system came up with the idea of mailing a mask that's branded. And in that communication, they can talk about all the steps they've done to keep that bus ride as safe as possible.
That's terrific. So no new questions yet, but if you do have a question, please feel free to send that in. We'll wait another beat.
Maybe we can ask one. Is anyone else doing anything somewhat innovative to reassure riders and bring them back to using the service?
Yeah.
Got a comment from Morgan, everything we can, exclamation point.
Well, I went back and looked at the Polco survey one more time. More responses came in from when AT started. 90% have lost passengers. And by how much? The largest percentage was 50 to 65%.
All right, so yeah, significant loss in ridership. You know, I was parallel to the airline industry. You know, if you're in a frequent flyer program and they've got your email address, I think I get at least weekly emails of what they're doing, so I can feel safe if I go and get on a plane. And you know, are we doing things like that in transit to keep reassuring passengers that we've got solutions? The latest one I saw was not the airlines, but somebody looking at what they're doing and suggesting that maybe all the chemicals they're using to clean the plane are going to have an adverse effect on passengers because the cleaning is so extensive. But there definitely some solutions. I know some of the agencies are working on how do you have appropriate ventilation in buses, and you know, there's things that can be done. The key is, are we getting the word out to reassure passengers and bring them back to at least use the capacity that we do have available.
One of the systems I'm working with is doing a utility bill stuffer right now, and they're going to be talking about transporting students, preschoolers and K through 12. Parents are struggling right now to figure out how to do the transportation in COVID. So I think that utility stuffer is an example of showing you value. You know, we're here to help you solve a problem. And we're using photos of preschoolers on the bus wearing masks.
I did one also, I believe, where there were like COVID care packages where you could talk a little bit about that one. They were, if I remember correctly, it was a little packet that had hand sanitizer and wipes and a mask and things like that that were handed to folks as kind of a, you know, again, that were branded that were a way, and you showed a picture of the hand sanitizer as well, but little packages that you know, make people feel safe, and then also have the added benefit of other passengers knowing that other folks have access to those things as well.
Yes, most of the bus I've been talking to in the last 6 months have masks that they hand out, you know, to riders as they get on if they don't arrive with their own. But yeah, it's that message of we care about you. We care about our drivers too. Now is a good time to be thanking publicly the drivers, the administration, the people that make the system run.
All frontline, all essential.
I heard in another training, January referred to as thankuary. I thought, oh, what a good idea to spend, you know, now would be a good time to start thinking about a January campaign of thanking everyone involved with your system. From the elected officials that vote on things for you, to the people that answer the phone, to the drivers, to everybody. Referral sources, those community members, your TAC.
Well, I think we might have exhausted all the questions. It's been quiet for a while. Are there any closing thoughts? I don't know, Margaret, if it's okay for us to close a little early, or what your thoughts are on that. We can certainly hang on the line and keep answering questions until 3, but.
No, that's fine. We don't have to go till 3.
Perfect. Any last words from any of our wonderful panelists?
AT, why don't you started us off? Why don't you start us
All
off?
right, good. Well, hopefully we've shared some good ideas for you and some things that you can use. Certainly the times are challenging, but there are ways to get around it. It takes a little bit of thought and maybe trying some things and find out what works, what maybe doesn't work in your community, but we've got to be on top of it now more than ever. So hopefully it was a benefit to you. Certainly enjoyed putting this together and having a time with you. Wish you could be there and be in person. It's always more fun. And as Jill said, you know, our Zoom meetings is effective, and I'm one of the ones, and maybe it's my age, I don't know, but I'm thinking they work, but not nearly as effective as being in person. But, so thank you. I guess Jill Brown's next, right? B and then
Yeah.
C.
Also want to say thank you. I really enjoyed working with Jill and AT on this. In the handout that is available online, you will find all of our contact information. I encourage you to reach out to us. Please reach out to me if you want to know more about Revelio or Polco, digital advertising. Be happy to talk about your particular situation. Thank you.
I'll just say the same. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for all that you do. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to any of us.
Got a couple of notes of thanks from the audience. Thanks everyone for your time. I'll turn it back to Margaret.
Okay, well, thank you for such a great session. We want to thank our panelists. And again, our next session is at 4 o'clock. We'll have the MPTA annual meeting. You won't want to miss it because we have this great awards video that we'll be showing, and we're doing elections and giving everybody an update for the year. So the next Zoom is 4 o'clock.